Hey, welcome to Failcraftcast. I'm Hammy, hope you're all well and good, and today we're going to be looking at, in our 2-minute deck intro and guide series, none other than Colma's Mech Druid. So, lots of ramp druids going around. We are going to be taking a look at how Colma uses Mech in a bit of a different way in just 2 minutes. Be a longer guide at the end if you fancy it, but without further ado, let's get ourselves stuck in and ready to be jumping into this deck in 3, 2, 1, go. So, Ramp Druid, very, very common. Ramp Druids very often jump onto Innovate and Wild Growth and similar cards, perhaps with a coin if you're going second, and then what you do is get out bigger cards more quickly. That is a Ramp Druid. How does Colma's Mech Druid vary a little bit? Well, if we take a look at it in terms of mana curve, you can see there's not so much huge stacking in the late game. Ramp Druids have been around for a while. They tend to use lots of control in the early game if they can, but they're limited to things like Wrath, which you can see here. You can also see the Keeper of the Grove. These are your tools against aggressive decks, rushes, zoos, hunters, the ever popular Mech Mage and Shaman at this particular time, things that hit you in the early game with Hearthstone in a very big, nasty way. So how do you use this particular deck to get ahead and stay ahead? This deck is actually quite nice. I like the idea of it because you can use the very solid core of mechs that are very strong in the early game and meld that together with Druid control cards. That means that along with the ramping ability of Druid, you've got Innovate, you've got Wild Growth. Using a combination of those will help you get out your mid-game cards a little bit earlier, moving into Swipes, Keeper of the Groves, and all of these 4 and 5 drops that would usually be accessed through a Ramp Druid. As well as that, a Druid, if they were ramping, would normally use pretty much Keeper of the Grove, Swipe and Wrath to keep themselves in the game in the early game. Here you now have the power of Mechs. So by using Mechs you can actually jump into things like Mech Warper. That's like having another Wild Growth. You don't need to accelerate your mana if you've got a Mech Warper and another cheap Mech in hand. Harvest Golems and Spider Tanks are brilliant, strong cards in the early game. The Harvest Golem gives you a 2-for-1 trade with that damaged Golem that gets summoned, and then Swipe and Keeper of the Grove are your usual control. Use them to get rid of lots of nasty small cards against Mechs, maybe against Hunter, drops with low health. Getting into the middle of the game, if you've been able to innovate, Mechanical Yeti, Piloted Shredder, and 2 Azure Drakes give you the spell damage for your other spells for removal. Can't draw in the Azure Drake, a triple threat because it can also do a nice bit of trading with 4 attack and 4 health, and then the trade with the Piloted Golem. As we come up to our 2 minutes, it's going to be a loud alarm. I'm sorry for that, we'll just quickly finish off. Coming into the mid-game, you have Loatheb. That will certainly mean that you can slow down your opponent's spells with a 5/5 body. That will do some good damage to the table. And then Force of Nature and Savage Roar. We've got 2 Savage Roar at 3 mana, 2 Force of Nature. If you can keep yourself alive and fill your table enough with minions in the mid to mid-late game, instead of having lots of big minions to finish, then you finish up your game with Savage Roar and Force of Nature. Remember, Force of Nature, 3 treants that can charge. Savage Roar increases the attack of all minions on the table and your hero by 2. So if you've got nothing on the table, Force of Nature and Savage Roar is a 14 damage combo if there are no tanks in the way, nothing blocking you from doing that damage to your opponent's face. So that's our 2-minute introduction. Thanks very much for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed that. If you've got any feedback, please like, comment straight underneath here. Let me know what we can do to improve this for you. If you take a little look, if I can get my angles right, in the top left, then you can see a link to the longer version of this. We'll play through a couple of ladder games, a couple of casual games, and show you this deck in action. If you take a look in the top right, then you can subscribe, or you can find more 2-minute deck intros and similar things. So thanks very much for tuning in. This is Failcraftcast. I've been Hammy. Take it easy.